All right. Sorry for the little delay, but I think we got everything working. Everyone, my name is Ravi. I'm going to talk to you today about consumer research and a couple of ways that you can start to build better connections and better understanding of your audience. I'm myself with a company called Innovation Grove, which specializes in market research, consumer research, particularly in the gaming space. And I'm also here with the Mighty Diamonds. We have a booth in the back there. If you haven't already popped in to say hi, please do so. Wave to them. Hi, Diamonds, back there. But before I even go into that, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I've been working in the game space for about 12 years. I started off at EA doing consumer research on pretty much every game in the portfolio with the exception of one or two sports titles. I spent a lot of time working on the EA Originals portfolio, which, if you're not aware, is basically EA's program to bring up indie games and publish them for those studios. So I have a lot of experience working with small studios, medium and large AAA studios as well. About 4 years ago, I started working with smaller and medium studios that need more of a connection with players and with their audiences. I know a lot of, particularly AAA studios, have a lot of resources to be able to reach out and talk to players. It's extremely important that to have that perspective, that player understanding, but a lot of smaller studios just don't have the resources to do that. And it's particularly important when you start to talk to investors and you start to talk to publishers about understanding what the opportunity is, what the market looks like, to have that type of data to go into those types of conversations. So I try to help studios provide that type of information. And it's not just about looking at your current players, but I also spend a lot of time talking about potential players, lapsed players as well, because they're all part of your ecosystem. So I'm going to talk about player insights. And a lot of people ask me, well, what do you exactly mean by that? Well, there's a lot of data that you can get about your players. There's telemetry. Hopefully, you are putting hooks into your games, but I know most of you probably struggle to do that. Even the AAA studios struggle to put hooks into their game. But the telemetry is going to tell you what players are doing, what modes they're playing, what time of day they're playing, what modes or what types of content they're spending money on. So it's a lot of behavioral information, which is really valuable. Hopefully, you're also doing a lot of usability and player experience testing, and that's going to tell you how people are playing the games, how difficult the game might be, how intuitive the controls are. What I specialize in is the area around the why. Why are people making those choices? What are the motivations behind it? Why are they picking one mode over another? Why are they picking your game over another? That's the type of information you can't always get from the behavioral or from the usability testing. The example I often use is that people will play, you can look at their behavior and you can see that they're playing multiplayer mode, but it's not always clear, are they playing it because they're super competitive and they want to climb the leaderboard, or because they want to have a social connection with their friends. What I do is I go in there and I talk to players and help the studios understand what those motivations are for that. So what I'm going to share with you guys today are just a couple of tactics, a couple of strategies that I've seen that are quite effective. I've worked with studios where they have a good dialogue with their audience, with their community, but they could be doing a little bit better in terms of understanding who their players are, looking at the data a little bit more effectively. So what I'm going to be offering to you would be relatively easy and accessible tactics, things that pretty much anyone in this room can do. I'm not expecting you to have a bunch of experience in market research to be able to do it, but it helps if you've written surveys before. And I know money is tight. So what I'm going to be recommending to you would be low or no cost solutions. In some cases, you might have to pay a little bit, but the idea here is that with the exception of time, it shouldn't really cost you too much to do some of these things, to really get some really good understanding about who's playing your games. And they should be accessible to anybody. You don't need to have a degree in statistics to be able to do this. It helps if you have an analytical mindset, if you like looking at data, but you don't really need to have you don't need to be a data scientist to do some of these little analytical approaches here. The first thing I want to talk about is going beyond the core, talking to your broader player base. So studios do an amazing job of talking to the core audience, and that is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. You should absolutely be talking to your core players. They are the backbone of your game. They are the ones that are monetizing, hopefully. They're the ones that are playing the most. They're the advocates. But in a lot of cases, they might only be 5% of your player base. There's a ton of other people out there that you need to be paying attention to because that's going to fill up your servers. They're going to also be able to amplify your messaging and your experience. The other challenge with the core is that they're very vocal. It's, again, a good thing. They're very passionate about your game, but they often drown out the other messages around there. And it's not always representative. Again, they could just be 4 or 5% of your audience, and you want to make sure that you have the other perspective that's coming through. So that silent majority, that maybe a casual player base or the less engaged player base, you want to capture that perspective, but they're hard to reach, right? They're not always following you on Discord. They might not be signed up to receive your emails. If they are receiving your emails, are they all reading your emails? And if they are reading them and you send out a survey, are they going to take the time to fill out a survey for free in their busy days? I don't know how many of you get surveys, get requests to fill out information, and you take the time to do it for a brand that you might like, but you're not completely in love with. I work in market research. I do this type of work day in and day out, and I don't fill out every survey that comes down in my email. So I can imagine that unless it's a brand that I really love. So there's going to be a lot of people out there that are really, really difficult to reach. On top of that, you might want to talk to people who aren't even in your community, talking to people that are, that you want to acquire and bring in. And then at that point, there's really not a lot of ways to be able to reach them if you want to get feedback from them, if you want to get data from them. So one way to do that is to reach them through a panel, a research panel. So what do I mean by a research panel? These are basically large databases that are set up specifically for you to be able to tap into. So there are companies out there that manage them. There are millions and millions of people have signed up. There are people that have opted in to be able to receive surveys. And they give you the opportunity to talk to anybody. They have a global reach. You can talk to gamers, you can talk to non-gamers. You pretty much find anybody you want in these programs. The trick is you do have to pay for it. So you pay per response. It's not much. It's usually a couple of bucks per response, and you only pay for what you need. So if somebody comes into your survey and you don't want to talk to them, if they're not the right candidate, just kick them out of the survey, and you don't have to pay for them. So essentially, how much do you pay, though? That's a good question. It really depends on how easy it is to find them. If you want to talk to a PC gamer, they're very easy to find. You're not going to pay a whole lot. But if you want to talk to people that are playing a very specific genre on a very specific platform in a very specific part of the world, and they're left-handed, you can find them, but they're going to cost you. So you want to be realistic about who you want to target, who you want to bring into these surveys. The other advantage of working with a panel like this is that it allows you to be a little bit removed from the community and from your game. So for example, if you're testing out some new ideas and some new concepts, you're not ready to put them in front of your actual player base, an external panel can do that. You could just remove your name, your branding from the survey, and you'd be able to get a lot of really good feedback from players without having to maybe reveal too much to your own community. The other thing they can do too is they can help out with writing your surveys. It's not rocket science. It's actually quite straightforward, but there's some easy things you can do when you're writing a survey to get better data. You don't want to ask leading questions. There are certain question types that are better than others when you're doing research. They can help you out with that. I could also help you with that too if you're interested, but it just helps make the analysis a lot easier too. When you go down this route and you build a survey and you're working with an external sample, there are a lot of things you have to consider though. Number one, you want to set up a screener in your survey. So a screener is basically at the very beginning of your survey, you just have a bunch of questions to identify your right target audience. I see a lot of the time that people are reaching out to their community. They don't put a screener in there because everybody's already qualified. You know that your community is the right people to be talking to. But when you're talking to a much broader audience, there are certain people that you might not want into your survey. So it's very important you put your screener at the upfront in the survey. And with that, you want to be specific who you're talking to. Again, you might have a profile in mind. Maybe there's a certain platform, a certain genre that you're looking for. You want to have those questions in there. And if they don't qualify, just kick them out of the survey. And you don't have to pay for them. The trick is you don't want to be too specific. If you're too specific, one, you're going to pay for it, and you might not need that level of granularity. And you're going to be spending a lot of money for data that's not going to be that much different. If you're having trouble finding the right people that qualify for your survey, you can loosen up your criteria, maybe look for people that are adjacent to your target audience, maybe similar genres or similar platform. But the idea here is that you want to be able to find people that are within your target audience that you want to be able to pull into. And only qualify the people that you want in your survey. Again, you don't want to pay for the people that aren't qualified, but you also don't want to pay for a lot of the nonsense and, unfortunately, garbage responses that you might get in surveys. So I know it. I get it a lot. I see when a lot of survey data comes in, people love filling out surveys, or at least there are certain people that love to fill out surveys. You don't always want them in, so you want to screen them out too. An easy way to do it is just to ask certain questions that you would expect people to say no to. So for example, I ask people in a lot of surveys, what platform do you play on? Do you play on the Xbox? Do you play on the PlayStation? Do you play on the Vivendi? Or do you play on Switch? And if they say the Vivendi, I kick them out of the survey. There's no such thing. But you'd be surprised at how many people would just click yes to a bunch of things trying to qualify for a survey. It's extremely effective. It's an easy way to weed out a lot of the bad candidates. And the other thing too is it can be helpful for weeding out bots too, because you get a lot of bots that come in. When you do kick people out of the survey though, it's important you wait until the end of the screener to do it. If you kick them out too early, people are going to start to figure out what answers are good and bad to kind of game the system. So you wait till the end, and it makes it very difficult for people or bots to really game the survey. And then you're also making sure that they're paying attention and you get better quality responses going through it. And the important thing is quality. You really want to make sure you're getting good data in. It's very easy to just open up the survey and let anyone come in, but these aren't necessarily the people you want to be talking to. So you filter out the people that you don't want to be talking to. You filter them out through your screener, but then afterwards too, when the data comes in, you look at the data and you make sure that it looks reasonable. For example, one easy thing to do is, let's say your survey takes 10 minutes to complete. You can look in the data. Most survey tools will tell you how long each respondent takes. If they're filling it out in like 30 seconds, if they're filling it out in a minute, you may think, okay, maybe they're not actually reading the whole survey. So you can kick them out of the survey. You can actually kick them out after the survey is done, go back to the panel provider and tell them, I don't like these respondents. I don't think they're good data, and they won't charge you for it. So again, only pay for what you need. And then again, there will be bias. So I'm not going to say that survey data is 100% perfect. There are people out there that love filling out surveys. You can reduce that, you can mitigate that, but you can't eliminate it completely. But every data set is going to have some bias. Even your core is going to be biased. They're going to be biased towards you. They're going to give you lots of loving feedback about how much they love your game, and it feels so good to hear that data. It's great data, but it may not be the whole story, and it may not be the information you need to be able to make the best game for as many people as possible. So knowing that there's bias in there, the most important thing to do is just to make sure that you take that data and you don't combine it with other data sets that you carry, and that you go through it, the analysis, you have that mindset that, okay, there's going to be some bias here, I just need to be cognizant of it. Beyond that, we're going to talk about cohort analysis. What do I mean by that? Well, another way of thinking about it is crosstabs. If you've done any type of analysis like this, survey data, you know what crosstabs are, but basically these are just the intersection of two data points, two questions or more in your survey. For example, you might ask somebody, what platforms do you play? And then you might ask them, what genres do you play? You can split the data based off of that. So you can say, okay, I want to look at PC players, Xbox players, mobile players, and I want to see what genres they're playing on. You can start to compare how the different groups of players, the different cohorts are scoring on different questions and answers. It is extremely valuable. It gives you so much insight. And I've worked with so many studios that have done research where they don't make these simple splits, and they're losing a lot of the richness in the data. And it really allows you to start looking at key differences about across your audience that helps you then make meaningful decisions and strategic decisions to be able to serve them better. So I'll give you an example. From a couple years ago, I worked on a game. I worked on an IP that is quite relevant in a galaxy far, far away, where we had a trailer that came in that was a live action trailer that was produced for it. And there was also a gameplay trailer. Now, we always launched with a gameplay trailer. That was just Gaming 101. But the live action trailer was a bit more creative, a little bit more fun. They never performed as well as the gameplay trailer. They never did, because The gameplay trailers just really told people what the game was all about. That's what people cared about. But this live action trailer comes in, and internally we all loved it. It was so beautiful. It was the nostalgia aspect of it. We loved it, and we tested it, and it tested very similar to the gameplay trailer. Not overwhelmingly better, but still in the same ballpark. And we thought, well, there's no risk with going with the live action trailer, and we all love it. So let's just go with it. We know that it's good. It just made us feel great about it, but we did split the data just to make sure. And what we ended up seeing was that if you look at it by age group, you see a very, very different story here. So the younger audiences liked the gameplay trailer in the end and not the live action trailer. It was the opposite for the older players. The older players were really gravitating towards the live action trailer, and they weren't that focused on the gameplay trailer. Just by doing a simple split of the data here, we're able to completely have a completely different approach and strategy to the media plan. What was initially going to be one trailer with all of our budget behind it was now split with a much more targeted approach, where we have the gameplay trailer targeting younger players, the live action one going for the older players, and basically maximizing these differences and really being more strategic with that approach. The other thing too that's worth pointing out about this is that, again, we were all very excited about this live action trailer. And we looked around the room when we were making the decisions, we were all mid-30s, early 40s making decisions. And we didn't have that younger perspective to come in here and say, hey, look, I don't care about that IP. I don't have any nostalgia for it. I didn't grow up with it. The rest of us did. So without this data, we could have made a very, very different approach and a very bad decision. And so it's important that when you're doing research that you do get those perspectives of people that aren't necessarily your own to represent a more inclusive audience. So how do you build these cohorts? There's no defined way of doing it. It's a little bit of arts, a little bit of science. It's sort of you know your game really well, you know your audience. That's kind of the first place to start, but you can look at it through demographics like age, which we just did. Maybe gender is important, what platforms they're playing on. Look at it through engagement levels. So, for example, people that are spending a lot of time or money, maybe that's going to be one cohort. People that are never paid at all in your game could be another cohort. Regions is actually a really important one. We'll talk about this a few times, but it's important to split people by region because cultural differences can be a factor too. And again, I see this happening a lot where people will survey their community, they'll get a bunch of data in and they won't split it by region, and you lose a lot of richness in the data. How big should a cohort be? Statistically, you want to be going for around 200 people per cohort. If you go below that, then you start working with smaller data sets, and then the margin of error goes up, and the data is less reliable. So 200 is a good rule of thumb. If you have a data set where it comes in and maybe you have one cohort that has 350 people and the other cohort has only 50, you really won't be able to look at that data set of 50 very, very confidently. So you want to try to split the data in a way that you can look at those differences more meaningfully. And how do you do it? You don't need any fancy tools. Most of you already have Excel or Google Sheets, and you can do that in there. All you need to do is set up a filter. A lot of us know how to do that. If you don't, there's some easy tutorials on how to set up filters. That's it. And then from there, you can split your data very easily and get a very good view of different audiences and start doing that type of analysis. If you want to do something a little bit more complex, we're talking about doing something like a motivations-based segmentation, where you're doing clustering, where you're using multiple variables to come in and try to give you these different segments. That's a little bit more complex. We're not going to talk about that. It's a little bit outside of the scope of what I'm talking about today. It's something we can do, but I tell most of the teams that I work with, before you even get to that point, just start doing some basic cohort analysis. You'll see some really rich data come through. The third one I want to talk about is not to be average. And what I mean by that is that it's very easy to look at the average score that comes in from your data and report on that, but you lose a lot of the granularity. You lose a lot of the richness from that data. So it's important to look at the distribution. So this is where we get a little technical, but again, I'm not going to get too deep into it. I'm not going to talk about standard deviation or sigmas or anything. No. I'm just saying, just look at the distribution of scores and see if there's any kind of outliers in there. Outliers would be anyone that just really pulling the average really high or really low. They could be valid data. They might be important people. They could be people that are just really heavily monetizing your game, and you want to get that perspective. But maybe you don't want to consider them as part of the overall data set because they're shifting the average. Other things to be looking at in terms of before you just take the overall average and splitting up again, it's by going back to those cohorts. So it's very important. You look at those cohorts. It could be platform. PC players versus console players going to have very different attitudes about certain things, and you want to be able to capture that. So before you take an average of everybody, start doing these splits. Region, another one too. I'm going to keep saying that. You really want to be looking at your data through different lenses, just to get that level of granularity. Whoops. But in the end, you know your game best. Use your own expertise to decide what those cohorts are going to be. So just a little example here. Again, I won't overwhelm you with data, but if we look at these three charts here, if you take the average score of each chart here, you get $50, 50 hours, whatever it is, but 50. If you look at the first chart, and if you came to me and said, "Hey, Ravi, we ran this data, the average came back as 50, and I looked at the data here," I'd be like, "Cool, yeah. 50 looks like a representative of your audience because pretty much everybody was within that range." Unfortunately, you never get data like this. It's always going to be a little bit more, there's going to be more variation in the data. You might get something like this, more linear line here. And if you told me, okay, well, the average is 50, I'd say, okay, well, with 50, you're going to capture a bigger chunk of the audience. You're going to have some people in the middle, but you're still not going to capture those outliers. But you might still be able to go with 50. It depends on your needs. It depends on your objectives. But what ends up happening a lot of time is you get data like this. And this one is actually very tricky. But you imagine this could be your spend profile for your audience, where you have a few people spending a ton of money or time in your game, and then you have a bunch of people on the other end that are spending nothing in your game. And if you take the average of this chart here, you get 50. But 50 doesn't actually represent anybody in this data set. Everybody's on either the far end of the right or the left. So what you could do, knowing that information, is start to look at other ways of splitting the data. Maybe you want to look at just your high-value customers and your low-value customers as separate data sets and then take the average at that point. But if you take it over the overall data set, you lose a lot of richness. And in fact, that 50 doesn't really represent anybody in your player base. So I've talked about this a few times, but it's really important to localize your surveys. And I'm not just talking about translations, although that's a big part of it, but you really want to make sure that you're making your surveys relevant and accessible to people in your broader community. If you're localizing your game, you should be localizing your surveys. And if you're not localizing your games, you should still be localizing your surveys because it doesn't take that much effort. It's actually quite straightforward. I know it's a lot more difficult to make sure your game is localized and translated, but surveys are much more straightforward. And again, re-emphasizing this cohorts, you want to split your data by region. If you have enough data coming in your community, you have enough people in different regions to justify splitting out by country or by maybe larger geographies, you do want to do that because you're going to find that certain countries fill out surveys differently than others. Americans and Brazilians love to give you a 10 out of 10. If you gave them the option, they would give you an 11 out of 10 or a 20 out of 10. They love giving high scores. They're super excited about stuff. Germany, you'll be lucky to get a 9 or a 10 out of 10 for a product that they actually genuinely like. It's not that they don't like the product, they actually do, but they reserve those scores for something that's really, really meaningful for them. So if you compare a data set of American data and German data next to each other, you'll see a big difference, but it doesn't mean that it's not as popular. You just want to take those cultural considerations in mind, but you need to be able to make sure that you're doing the localization to be able to make sure you're capturing those responses in different regions. And to do it, again, very easy to do. You don't need to pay a translator or a localization specialist because with surveys, with market research, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. But you want to make sure that you take the opportunity to review the final translations with somebody who's a native speaker. So I usually use DeepL or ChatGPT to do the initial pass where I translate the survey. And then I ask somebody if I know somebody in my network who speaks the local language and hopefully knows a little bit about gaming to be able to just read through it, make a couple red line edits, 5 minutes, and they're done. Much easier than asking somebody to translate the whole thing from scratch. And it's important to do that, especially somebody with a gaming mindset, because, do you really want to rely on Google Translate to translate Steam or Switch the way you want it to be translated? It may not do it correctly. So it's important that you have somebody with a gaming mindset just look through it. And again, when you localize your surveys, you're going to get better response rates. If you're working with the panel, I think I talked about before, you're going to get more people filling out your survey, which is going to improve your incidence rate, which is going to lower your cost. So that's a good thing. If you're working with just your community, you're going to get more responses. You're going to get more data if you localize your survey. So again, think about your audience and think about how you can give them a better experience. But you're also going to get more accurate data too, because you're not relying on a third-party tool that you have no control over to do the translations. You have control over that translation, so you know exactly what people are responding to. And I've seen this time and time again where people haven't properly localized the survey. They might just translate it, but they don't actually think about the nuances that go with it. And then the data that comes in is not usable. Most survey tools, even the free ones like SurveyMonkey, will allow you to do translations. They won't do the translation for you. You still have to do that using, ChatGPT or Google Translate. But what they will let you do is they'll let you export your survey in whatever language you're using, and then you translate that into whatever the preferred language is, and then you can import that back into the tool, and it handles that all for you. So it makes it very easy. It takes 10, 15 minutes, and then you've got your localized survey. Make sure that you're taking into consideration things like, local factors, whether it's the big one is currency, right? So you want to make sure if you translate, or you're working in different regions, you want to make sure that you change the currency to euros or to pounds or dollars or whatever. Certain regions have different channels, media channels that are more relevant. So you want to make sure that when you're localizing, you're also taking that into consideration as well. And a pro tip from a pro who's done this many, many times and made mistakes along the way, don't make my mistakes. Wait till the end of your survey, of the programming and the testing, to do the translations. Even maybe do a soft launch, get a little bit of data. When you look at it, make sure everything looks okay, because there's nothing worse than going back and fixing and tweaking the language in a survey, changing the questions around when you've already done the translations, and then you have to then start trickling down these changes into the other ones. Just better to do it at the very end, and then your translations are just done once, one and done. And now we get to the exciting part of the presentation, GDPR. Yeah, no, I know. None of us like talking about this stuff. It's not the most exciting part of my job, but it's one of the more important parts of it too. So it's, in the last couple of years, if you guys have been paying attention, the rules have changed a bit when it comes to player data. And there's a lot more scrutiny on what type of data we collect, how we collect it, what we do with that information. And, they kind of took a lot of the fun out of doing market research, because you get some really cool, rich data from players, and you can build these really rich profiles. But now with privacy rules, you can't do a lot of that stuff. So GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, it's an EU standard, but it's something that applies pretty much to the whole world. So if you're compliant with GDPR, you're good with that. In terms of what GDPR is, you've got these 6 principles that you need to abide by. You've got I'm already getting bored talking about this stuff, but you got lawful and transparent. You got limited purpose. But look, you got all this stuff. I don't want to trivialize it. It is very important, but it's also super boring and complex, and I don't want to bog you down with a bunch of the details about what you need to know and not know about GDPR by going through all of these 6 principles. So what I would tell you is this. Let me boil it down for you. Don't collect personally identifiable information if you don't need it. PII, you probably heard that. What does that exactly mean? PII is the amount of information to be able to identify uniquely one person on this planet out of the 8.1 billion people that are walking around. If you have enough information to identify one person, single them out, that is PII. That could be an email address, that could be a phone number, a user ID. If you're collecting that type of information from people, you have to be careful, because then you open yourself up to a lot more scrutiny, a lot more liability, a lot more risk. Chances are you don't need that information. If you do need it, we talk about it, we figure out what's the right way to handle it. But most often than not, most teams that I work with, they're collecting a bunch of that information and they never use it. You also want to make sure you're not talking to minors. What are minors? Kids. But what does that exactly mean? Every country has different rules about how young you can talk to with surveys. Sometimes it's, anyone under 18. Sometimes anyone under 16, under 13. It's very complex. And if you're running a global study, you're going to have all these different rules that you're going to have to comply by. The best thing to do is just don't talk to kids. The other challenge too is if you do end up talking to kids, a lot of times you need to get parental consent. If you get parental consent, it's going to drive the cost up. It's going to be more complex. It's going to just slow everything down. And I rarely see it being worth the hustle to get all of that information. So 18 and above is your best approach. Again, if you need to talk with kids because you have a very specific need, we talk about that. We figure out the best strategy around it. But unless you absolutely need to do it, just don't do it. Make sure you're getting consent from your player to give them any information if you're collecting PII. Even if you're not getting PII from them, it's still good to just get permission for them to give you any kind of feedback. Now, you might have consent from your players to be able to send them marketing emails or communications. You might have consent to be able to install updates onto their hardware. But you might not have consent to be able to get a market research from them. So you just need to make sure you put that into your survey. And if you have a link to a privacy policy, which hopefully you do have a privacy policy, if you don't, go get one. And then link to that too, so players have the opportunity to at least understand what you're doing with their data, and they also have the opportunity to reach out to you if they have any issues or any questions about it. You want to limit the access to the data. I see so many times people collect a bunch of data, and it's got a lot of sensitive information in it, and they just post it on a shared drive in their company where anybody can get to it, where an intern can download it, take it home, post it on Discord. You be very, very, very careful. I cannot emphasize this enough. There is so much liability, so much risk with putting this personal information out there. So when you collect data, limit the access to it to just the people that are working on the analysis of it. Could be 1 or 2 people, no more than that. Anybody else, they can just see the analysis, the report, everything that comes out of it. With aggregated data, anonymized data, it's fine. But any sensitive information, you really, really want to make sure that it's not on a public server or a shared drive within your company, because you can really open yourselves up to a lot of risk. And then on top of that, you want to make sure that if you are collecting any kind of sensitive information, sensitive again, it's just PII. It could be just their email address. That could be considered sensitive information. You want to make sure that you delete that information as quickly as possible. When you're done using that information, you drop it. If you're not sure how long you're going to use it for, I would still recommend delete it after a couple of months. 6 months is kind of a good standard for deleting personal information. I should also point out too that PII doesn't have to be just one data point that's very specific, like an email address. It could be a couple of data points that if you put them together, like a first name, a platform they're playing on, their occupation, and their hometown. Those 4 data points could be enough to identify one single person on the planet. And if you have that much information about somebody, that's PII, and you have to be very careful again. And again, do you really need their name? Okay, maybe you're going to do some outreach, but there are better ways to do it. You don't need to get the names of thousands of people in your community if you're only going to be talking to 10, 15 of them. There are better ways to do that than putting into a big study like this. So again, 5 tips on how you can learn about your audience, or I guess 4 tips on what you can do and 1 that you should not be doing when it comes to GDPR. But really just kind of recapping, going beyond your core, trying to understand, obviously you want to talk to your core, but there's a ton of other people out there that are very important that maybe are hard to reach, and you want to be able to go out there and get them. Cohort analysis is very important, that you don't just take all the data in one big lump, but you start looking at strategic breaks in the data to understand who are your key audiences, who are the people you want to be talking to, who do you want to prioritize or deprioritize. And then don't just focus on the average data, which is very easy to report on. Look at the distribution of the data that comes through. Start doing some cohort analysis, and then see, even then, do I want to look at the average? Do I want to look at clustering of data? But don't just take it at face value. spend a little bit extra time looking at it. Localizing your key regions is an important thing too. So you want to make sure you're getting better survey data. You want to be more inclusive with your outreach programs. And again, knowing that cultural differences are there, and people answer surveys differently based on different countries. It's important that you capture that information and you are able to separate them and to do the analysis. And then beware of GDPR. Main thing is, if you don't need PII, if you don't need personal information from people, don't ask for it. And if you absolutely do, be very careful about how you manage that. And that is it. So, if you have any other questions, I mean, obviously I'm going to take questions now, but if you want to know more about it, if you're doing some of the more complex stuff, feel free to get in touch with me now or reach out to the Mighty Diamonds. But I'm happy to take any questions that we might have right now. That's it. I saw a hand come up over here.
Yes. Do include translation and localization. So I'm a bit worried that sometimes those localization may turn out not the best quality.
Okay.
And I wonder, what are your thoughts about how the quality of the survey localization may create expectation for the game, especially if people know what game are you doing the survey for. So, for example, if the quality of localization is not the best, will people then expect the published game to not be the best? Or maybe you've also mentioned to localize the survey, even if the game is not localized, but can it not create an expectation?
Yes.
Be surprised that I was able to do the survey in my language, but then I can't play in my language. Like, what are your...
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So the question was, if you can't get a quality translation into a different language, is that going to reflect on the quality of the survey, which could then reflect on the quality of the game? Is that right? Yeah. So I would say that when I've done translations for surveys, I've taken the approach that I've done here, which is where I would start off with an initial approach of doing a first pass and through a free translation tool, and then reaching out to my network. If in a few cases I've had to go beyond my network, and then there are platforms out there where you can find people that are native speakers in that language for relatively cheap. So maybe not for free, but I'm not talking more than $20 or $30 or that equivalent of it. If you still are stuck at that point, the nice thing about research is that people they know that what you're working on is, or they often know that it is early stage, it's prototype. And so a lot of times when you can do in your disclaimers, if you start showing concepts, it's saying, look, these are early stage, these are prototypes, these may or may not come to market. And so then that tells people too that, okay, this is still very much a work in progress. But I think that when you start putting out the more rich the content is, for example, if you're starting to show like key art, if you're showing trailers in a trailer in a survey, you do want to make sure that that level of quality in the survey is consistent with the quality of the assets. Folks.
I have a follow-up question on translations, actually. How do you localize results out of the survey in case you have open-ended questions? Because it feels like it's easy to get people right in slang, or just do you just Google translate them, or how do you localize results?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, what do you do with open-ended responses? So when people are typing in text into your survey, the first thing I would say to that is try to avoid the open-ended. I know they're very tempting and you can get some really rich data from it, but the reality is if you're getting hundreds of thousands of responses, you're only going to pick a handful of those and actually read, unless you have a very, very, very excited intern to work for you. So what I do in those situations is I just put it back into one of the free translation tools, ChatGPT. The other thing I do, whether it's in English, natively in English or in another language, I'll translate it in my case, I'll translate it to English, and then you can use AI to help summarize and come up with the theme. So now if you have thousands of responses, you can actually start doing some analysis on it using AI for that. But those tools work really well for that. Oh, nope. I don't think his hand's up for a question. Yeah, Beta.
Hi, Ravi. Great talk, as always. I wanted to ask you a little bit, because you talk about segmenting your audience, and I know that there is available online predefined segments for games, the curious puzzle solver, like the treasure hunter, etc. What are your thoughts on teams using those pre-existing segment audiences for their data?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there are a lot of providers out there that have already segmented the audience into motivations. Newzoo does it, Quantic Foundry does it. I think that those are often a good start, especially if you are just getting into doing an audience understanding. What I found is that the needs start to change over time, where you start to get more specific into what you want to look at. So for example, maybe there's just 2 segments out of that loosely represent your player base, and you want to go deeper on that. Or those segments are designed to be sort of a one-size-fits-all, but your game presumably is not. You're on specific platforms, you're in a specific genre. So if you have the opportunity, you get much richer data if you can take that next step into looking at it more granular. I think that, but though, I actually use Quantic Foundry's model quite a bit in terms of motivation. I make some changes to it myself based on my experience with it, but there's a lot of data behind it, and it's a good start. And but as you start to go down that path, eventually you're going to want to get something more tailored for what you're working on. Well, any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. If something comes up later on, you feel free to reach out to me. I'll be here today and tomorrow, and otherwise, beyond that, I'm always available. So let me know. Thank you.